From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. The Alabama Legislature was not in session this week as the House and Senate took their first of two planned spring breaks. More on that in a bit. But Congress was very much in action this week as federal lawmakers were working to avoid a government shutdown. Midnight Friday was the deadline to pass a stopgap spending bill that would keep government agencies open and operational. The House narrowly passed a continuing resolution on Tuesday and then left town, leaving it up to the Senate. Democrats had the ability to block the bill through a filibuster, but thought better of it in the end. Our own Alex Engel reports from Capitol Hill on how it all unfolded and where Alabama's delegation stood in the debate.
A partisan battle on full display in Congress this week over a 6-month funding bill. The government funding deadline is midnight Saturday. The continuing resolution mostly maintains spending levels, but raises defense spending by $6 billion and cuts other spending by $13 billion, mostly from cutting earmarks. It first cleared the House Tuesday.
The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
Republicans and Democrats stood almost entirely unified on party lines during the House vote. Congressman Dale Strong, who recently joined the Appropriations Committee, says it was a necessary step to keep the government open.
President Trump has asked the Republican Party to move forward with this CR so that we can be one step closer to working on the 26 budget.
Congressman Robert Adderholt, also an appropriator, says continuing resolutions are never ideal, but ensure the federal government stays operational.
If it will keep the government open, making sure that our military has been paid, make sure that the folks that are getting their Social Security checks on time, making sure that all that's done, we need to make sure that happens at the end of the day.
Alabama Democrats stood with their party opposing the funding bill. Figure says it's a partisan plan that made too many cuts. Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries invoked his visit to Selma to commemorate Bloody Sunday to show Democrats opposition.
As they stood on that bridge, knew that there was trouble on the other side. But even though there was trouble on the other side, they believed that their cause was righteous, and it was a just one.
In the Senate, a major showdown between the GOP, Democrats, and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
While the CR bill is very bad, the potential for a shutdown has consequences for America that are much, much worse.
Senator Tommy Tuberville says he supported the bill to allow the president to enact his agenda.
President Trump needs these months coming up to not worry about it, to go and put his 2 cents worth in terms of getting our country back great again, but he can't do it if the government's shut down.
Senator Katie Britt also supported the funding bill, but wasn't especially keen on a full-year continuing resolution. As an appropriator, Britt says she will work to keep the Senate accountable in fiscal year 2026 to pass the 12 appropriations bills. She also says she will fight for Alabama's earmarks in that process. The funding bill runs through the end of September. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Alex Engel, Capitol Journal.
Thank you, Alex. And again, that stopgap funding bill will keep the government open, so no threat of a shutdown for now. Back here to Alabama, where a lot of schools are also on spring break or approaching it. For many families, that means a getaway to one of Alabama's beautiful state parks. Capitol Journal's Jeff Sanders takes a closer look at their growing popularity and some hidden gems you may not know about.
Alabama state parks are a year-round destination, but they truly come alive during spring break. As schools let out, families across the state are packing up for outdoor adventures, filling campgrounds, cabins, and even Alabama's inland beaches. And with 21 state parks spanning over 48,000 acres, there's a scenic retreat just a short drive away.
That's the beauty of Alabama state parks. No matter where you're at in the state, you're within a driving distance of a state park.
David Johnson, Assistant Superintendent of Oak Mountain State Park, the state's largest state park just south of Birmingham, says that attractions go far beyond hiking trails and campgrounds. From Mount Cheaha to Wind Creek, many of Alabama's inland parks offer a beach-like experience without the trip to the coast.
I get told a lot by guests that they walk up to me and they've lived here their whole life and they're like, "We've never been here. I can't believe this is here." And it always amazes me, and they tell me you have a beautiful state park, and I have to remind them that this isn't mine. I just get the privilege to help take care of it for you. It's your state park.
And while those inland beaches have become increasingly popular in recent years, there's also been an increase in popularity of RV campers, including here at Mayer State Park in Spanish Fort, where they're about to cut the ribbon on 45 brand new RV sites. Other planned upgrades include the construction of a brand new state-of-the-art lodge at Chehaw State Park, the highest point in Alabama. But improvements are happening all around the state, including the Gulf Coast. Matt Young is the superintendent of Mayer State Park as well as Gulf State Park, Alabama's most visited state park. Gulf State recently reopened its popular fishing pier, which had been closed for repairs since Hurricane Sally.
Well, I've got to give our state credit and Governor Ivey. I think that they've really looked at what our Alabama outdoors means to not just our residents but our visitors as well. And answering that call of we need more campsites, we need more opportunities to get not just our citizens and our state residents out, but also all the visitors, the tourism impact, and also the education impact of teaching people about Alabama.
And with new projects on the horizon, there's plenty more opportunities for adventures to come. For Capital Journal, I'm Jeff Sanders reporting.
Thank you, Jeff. And speaking of spring break, Alabama State Troopers are gearing up to keep travelers safe this season. The Alabama Law Enforcement Agency has launched its 5th annual Think Smart Before You Start campaign. The initiative focuses on promoting responsible decision-making, especially among teens and college students. State troopers will be increasing patrols on Alabama's roadways to crack down on speeding, distracted driving, and impaired driving. For those headed to Alabama's beaches, Aaliyah's aviation unit will once again deploy its rescue swimmer detail, working with lifeguards in Orange Beach and Gulf Shores to respond quickly to emergencies in the Gulf. Officials are also reminding spring breakers to wear seatbelts, stay aware of rip currents, and plan a safe ride home if needed. Troopers are stressing the importance of smart choices to ensure a fun and safe spring break experience.
This time of the year is when we see a lot of young people. They may be going to the beach, they may be going to the lake. This may be the first time where them and a group of friends, even if they're freshmen in college, even if it's their first year in college, this may be the first time that they're going to on a vacation without their parents, right? So that's where we really want the parents to have that conversation with their kids. Don't assume anything. Be very intentional. Don't assume that your 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old knows how to change a tire or even knows where the tire is. You got to make sure and have that conversation. Don't assume if an emergency happens, they know to get out their phone and call 911 or how to get in contact with law enforcement. Don't make those assumptions. So again, be very intentional. Have those conversations with your children, especially if you know they're going on these trips.
The Alabama Legislature will return next week, beginning on Tuesday, for the 14th day of the regular session. There is talk of a 3 legislative day week, meaning we could be past the halfway point by Thursday. Capital Journal's Randy Scott covers the House of Representatives, where members are reflecting on what has passed so far and what's to come. Here's his story.
Lawmakers in the Alabama House of Representatives got to work early and often, tackling proposals dealing with fighting crime.
Back the blue, letting law enforcement across the state know that we support them and we have their backs was big to me. And I think it will help us recruit officers and retain officers across the state. So I do think, of course, that's part of the crime package. We got it earlier, but that bill needed some work, and Chairman Reynolds done an extraordinary job working on that bill, and today certainly I think done a really good job explaining what it did and what we were trying to accomplish.
To immigration.
Certainly the immigration bill is something we've been working on during off season. Ben Robertson kind of was leading that. They done a really good job. Getting those out today was big.
To bills concerning providing help and aid for Alabama's veterans.
I really thought that we'd have a longer debate, more closely to what went with the Back the Blue debate. That's what I expected. But I think the thing with that, there's probably had been a lot of conversation, and I think between both chambers and members talking and having all those conversations probably had something to do with that. And everybody kind of knew where they were at this point.
Speaker of the House Nathaniel Ledbetter says the lower chamber was busy on many issues, but they still have many more to see when they return from spring break. Items including tax adjustments.
We have been working on during the last few weeks a number of tax cuts, and so ETF is meeting as we speak now to get those bills out of committee. So I think we'll see those on the floor next week. Excited to do that. I think if we get those out during this quadrennium, we've had over 15 tax cuts, the largest tax cuts in Alabama history.
Opening the door for more work on tax aid relief for Alabama taxpayers.
Those tax cuts and what we had rebated as well. The rebates, and a lot of people have forgotten about those, but that was just year before last. But those rebates were some $300 and some million. So a combination of them may be, but this particular package of 4 bills is like $190 million.
Also, possible bills which could address continuing concerns about IVF treatment for families trying to have children.
I think IVF and families having the opportunity to have children, what we did last year to make that happen has been positive. We've heard today that over 400 pregnancies have occurred and hundreds of babies have been born, so that was the goal.
At the State House, Randy Scott, Capital Journal.
Thank you, Randy. This week, Alabama education officials were briefly locked out of the federal system used to access school funding. That delayed routine reimbursements totaling $9 million. The so-called glitch is raising concerns among school officials about potential staffing cuts at the U.S. Department of Education. Alabama State Superintendent Eric Mackey told reporters that the interruption was brief, the issue was fixed, and that teachers' pay will not be impacted.
Yesterday, a little bit of money that was used to reimburse some teacher salaries was held up. No teacher in this state is even going to know whether that money was directed toward their salary or someone else's salary. So that's going to be covered. Teachers don't need to worry about anything. The only concern I would have is, as yesterday, we got this message from the department saying that if you need help, it's going to take us a long time to get back to you. And I've said several times, I hope that is not the case because, many times we need an answer from the U.S. Department of Ed quickly, and especially if it includes the flow of funds or technical assistance. This is only one day, and that note's been removed today, so I feel good about that. But we want to make sure that they have a plan so that they can respond to states quickly. They can respond quickly to states.
The Alabama State School Board this week voted unanimously to approve Dr. Mackey's recommendation to intervene in Dallas County schools. Mackey said that school officials there did not follow purchasing rules while spending $12.2 million in federal funds. He and the board are requiring that school district to repay those funds.
Last summer, in the routine audit process, the state examiners determined that there were several million dollars that had not gone through the proper procurement process. Now again, that doesn't mean somebody has stolen the money or anything like that. It just means they've not gone through the proper procurement processes. And so they reported that, as they would always do, to our department. Dallas County asked us to come in and do a deeper audit of their federal programs. This is all federal money. Federal rules are that you have to procure, whatever procurement you do with federal money, you have to follow your state's procurement laws. So we're doing several things right now, and I can't go into detail with, working with their CFO, and superintendent and working with feds on what exactly the final number would be, and is it, is what is that exact number of what is owed back, and how would it need to be paid back if it does ultimately have to be paid back to Washington.
Well, it's rodeo weekend here in the capital city. The Southeastern Livestock Exposition is hosting its annual rodeo at Garrett Coliseum with events and performances Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The festivities kicked off with the annual SLE parade through downtown Montgomery. Here's some video of that fun. This rodeo has all kinds of fun, family-friendly events celebrating farming and ranching. There's bull riding, of course, bronco riding, barrel racing, individual and team roping competitions, and so much more. It's always so much fun, and tickets are still available, either by going in person or by going to slerodeo.com. And I'll be speaking more about the rodeo with Agriculture Commissioner Rick Pate later in the show. We'll take a quick break and return with Governor Kay Ivey. Stay with us.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Welcome back to Capital Journal. Joining me next is Alabama Governor Kay Ivey. Governor, welcome back to Capital Journal.
Thanks, Todd. Good to be with you.
Yeah, good to have you back. Lots to talk about. It's a very busy session. We're enjoying a little bit of a break right now on spring break. Of course, you're not. I wanted to ask you about, first, public safety and crime. It's become the top issue of the session. You said it was your number one priority. What strikes me about that is it's your number one priority. Same for the legislature, the legislative leadership, the attorney general. It seems to be across the board. Talk about why that came to be. I mean, it seems to me that maybe it speaks to the problem that crime has become in Alabama.
Well, definitely it is a problem, and we've got to address it because without a safe Alabama, we cannot have any other progress in other areas, whether it's economic development or education or anything else. So Alabama needs a secure future, and secured safe future is our goal.
Mm-hmm. I imagine you had conversations leading up to this session with mayors, police. I know Secretary Taylor has been very involved in that, trying to take what has been successful in Montgomery in terms of the crime suppression units, expand it statewide. So talk about those conversations leading up to the session with mayors and locals saying, hey, we need some help.
Well, certainly we've heard from a lot of local leaders, and they are having a difficult time with public safety as well. And we've got lock switches out there that we need to get rid of, and need to pass some rules that will make it easier for our law enforcement to operate effectively and avoid Monday morning quarterbacking in the courts.
Right. Well, I think most of those crime bills are pretty non-controversial. You've got HB 202 with police immunity. It's passed the House. It is controversial, though. Democrats have pushed back on that. I know y'all have had some conversations in the governor's office with lawmakers here addressing the Democrats' concern. Are you confident that people can get together on that? It's the police immunity bill. You call it the Back the Blue plan. Are you confident that's going to get across the finish line, too?
I'm very hopeful it will. It's a pleasure to work with Speaker Ledbetter and his team, and he does a great job as well in the House. And Pro Tem Gudger in the Senate does a great job. So I just appreciate working with them and listening to them, and I believe together we'll get across the finish line.
Switching gears, Veterans Affairs. This has been a really hot topic this session. Of course, you had the one bill that was non-controversial about the Veterans Resource Center. I think they were just itching to pass that. They couldn't wait to pass that bill. That was everybody was on board. The other one was a little more controversial, having to do with restructuring the Department of Veterans Affairs, making it a cabinet appointment, also adjusting the governance structure, the board. Talk about that, because I know this was a priority for your office. At the beginning of the session, I would have thought this was non-controversial too, but you had some pushback from veterans groups. So talk about how y'all dealt with that and reworked the bill.
Thank you, Todd. Historically, the veterans have been served by a board that represented just a portion of our veterans. We've got 400,000 veterans living in our state calling Alabama home. And we want to serve all the veterans, not just a few of them. And so we've brought this legislation forward, and again, working with Speaker Ledbetter and Pro Tem Gudger, we're going to make this a big deal. And the veterans, my father was a veteran in World War II, and I'm passionate about our veterans. We want to take care of all of them, and having them in the governor's cabinet will give them a direct pipeline to information and assistance. So we're going to work our tails off to be good stewards for our veterans and help them be successful.
Mm-hmm. And I think everybody kind of agreed with that in terms of making the commissioner a cabinet level job, plugging that into other agencies and all that. But let's go back to, I guess, about a year ago, because all this bubbled up from that drama, kind of unfortunate drama having to do with the Department of Veterans Affairs, the commissioner. You ultimately used your constitutional authority to dismiss Kent Davis, and this is kind of where it all bubbled up from. So take us back to that and why this became such an issue to be addressed legislatively.
Well, the former chairman was not working well with other department heads, and that's an important job, and he needs to work with other cabinet officers to get the work done on behalf of the veterans. And the previous board was serving only a few folks of veterans, and we want to serve all the veterans. We had several groups of veterans supporting this bill, even though it was controversial. And I'm grateful for that, because our veterans are very, very important. They have given all they've got, laid their lives on the line. So the least we can do is be there for them.
Yeah, and I guess you're going to sign that bill as soon as it gets to your desk.
Next Tuesday when they come back, it'll be on my desk.
Okay. Another issue that you talked about in the State of the State address, it's being, put through the legislative process, banning cell phones in schools. Kind of seems common sense, but it is a little controversial. A lot of parents out there don't really, want that. They want to stay in touch with their students and everything. Talk about how this became a priority for you to the point where you actually pushed it in the State of the State.
Well, we've had the results of some surveys done nationwide, and some 72% of the teachers report that cell phones are a distraction to the students' learning in their classroom. So it just makes sense for cell phones to be banned from the classroom during instructional periods.
Bell to bell, that is what they say, right?
And it makes sense to do that, and the local boards of education will teach our students how to be responsible users of social media, because it's an important tool, but it's important to know when and where and how to use social media effectively. We want to protect our children and give them every positive environment condition we can so they can learn and learn well in their K through 12 experience.
Interesting. I was talking with the principal out at Pike Road Junior High, and they have enacted a ban on cell phones. I guess they started this year. And she was saying, of course, instructional time was better quality. They had some positive results. She also said students walking down the hallways aren't looking at their phones anymore. They're actually looking up and interacting. I find that really interesting. So I expect this to pass. But, educators over the years, you were an educator, you were a teacher, no cell phones back then. So it's a whole different kind of technology, and new technology breeds new regulations and laws, I suppose.
And we just need to help our teachers and students have a very positive learning environment.
Also on the issue of education, parental leave for teachers, also for state employees. This has been an issue for the last couple of years. A lot of folks didn't realize that if you're a teacher or an education worker, you don't have paid parental leave when you have a child or adopt a child and things like that. Normally they take vacation time or even unpaid time off, things like that. You made this a priority. It's going through the legislative process, but now questions are starting to be raised about costs. Because this does cost money. Are you confident that the state can afford something like paid parental leave for not just education workers, but also for state employees?
Yes, we are. The upfront startup costs will be minimal, and it is important that we give teachers and state workers the opportunity to have parental leave. Because if they're a young person, they want to start a family, they ought to be able to start a family. And so paid parental leave, it's just common sense that we need to do that.
Okay. You made news recently by commuting the death sentence of Robin Rocky Myers. He was sentenced to death for a murder back in 1991. This doesn't happen every day. You have the extraordinary power to commute sentences. You commuted him from a death sentence to life in prison without parole. Kind of extraordinary. Doesn't happen every day. Talk me through what led you to this decision.
Well, in this decision, and by the way, since I've been in office, we have conducted 22 executions. So I'm pro death penalty when is merited. But the lack of facts and there just were too many questions about this bill, and I just felt like we couldn't execute somebody that around which we had so many questions and lack of evidence.
Mm-hmm. So those questions led you to say, okay, well, you're not releasing him, you're not ending his sentence, you're just saying we don't want to execute him, the ultimate punishment, but you left him in prison with life without parole. So, I mean, what led you to that?
Well, it just goes to show how much detail we look at in every case that comes before us. And I got to be dead sure that the person is worthy of the death penalty. And in this case, there was just lack of evidence, no DNA, no fingerprints, no weapon found, and there was just too many unanswered questions.
Mm-hmm. Switching gears again, lots going on in Washington. I know you were recently up there for National Governors Association and things like that. It's moving at such a fast pace. You've got Elon Musk and the Doge operation, which I think a lot of people love the concept of government efficiency, finding ways to, hey, there's fraud, waste, and abuse in government. Everybody knows that. But some of these cuts have hit close to home. You've got, at the beginning it was NIH funding at UAB. You had Huntsville, some federal stuff up there kind of hit. There was the Greyhound bus station, the historic bus station. All those have kind of been put on hold. But talk about the impact of all that and your conversations with Alabama's congressional delegation about, hey, can we slow down a little bit? I mean, it is an impact on Alabama that maybe it was unexpected.
Well, reduction of costs for the government needs to be addressed, and so I applaud President Trump for doing that. And we stay in touch with the White House and with our congressional delegation. And yeah, there'll be some pain, but it'll take some pain to get some gain, because our government doesn't need to be overstaffed or we don't need to spend that much money on bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. So I think that his overall concept is worthy.
There's talk of also kind of doing the same thing here at the state level, having government efficiency talks, looking at state agencies and getting some costs there. Are you in touch with the legislative leadership about how to go about that and maybe go about it in a precise and calculated way?
Speaker Ledbetter's working well on that, and he's keeping me posted. So we're working together to reduce costs where we can here in Alabama as well.
Okay. Well, the legislature returns next week. There's a lot on the table. I know that you and your office are all involved in that legislation. Thanks again for coming on Capitol Journal. I really appreciate the update. I hope we can expect more. And is there anything else you can share with us about your efforts going forward in this legislative session?
Well, Todd, I read your recent Inside Alabama Politics article, and in it you mentioned something about golf balls, and so I just wanted to bring you a set. I told the gentleman at the table at our meeting that we were talking about some heavy lifts, and some of them might need some extra balls.
Okay, that's right. We did write about this, the famous golf balls, and if I'm not mistaken, they have the insignia on them, right?
Right.
How about that? The Great Seal of Alabama. I don't know if we can zoom in on that. And Governor Kay Ivey. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, the famous meeting with leadership, giving them some encouragement when it comes to tough legislation. Well, Governor, that's a real treat. Thank you so much.
Quite welcome.
We'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television, celebrating 70 years of service to Alabama.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall. Mr. Marshall, thanks for coming on the show.
Good to be here. Hey, we get a little bit of a breather this week, right?
Something of a breather.
Yeah.
Legislative spring break. Well, that's why it's actually good to be able to catch up with you, with others in the executive branch that stay in Montgomery, keep working. But I mean, y'all are working all year round. It's unfortunate sometimes during the session we don't get to hear from you as much. I really appreciate you making the time. Speaking of the legislative session, I wanted to talk to you about some legislation that you've been involved in, some that you've written, including the Speedy Trial Act. Has to do with getting judges, maybe retired judges or out-of-district judges, involved in taking care of the backlogs on cases. Tell me how this bill came about.
Yeah, we had meetings in Birmingham to talk about what we could do to be able to help what everyone has seen as the violent crime issue that had gone on in the city over the last several months. And one of the things that came out was just this backlog of cases they had waiting to be tried. And look, some of this can go back to the time of COVID when the jury system itself was shut down and it caused cases, crime didn't end, so we still had cases that were ongoing. We just couldn't have them have the ability to try them. This bill gives us the ability to try to address that using the existing resources of retired judges that can be called up when the Chief Justice believes that the case itself demands that resource be used. And so we're pleased that we give DAs an opportunity to be able to make that election along with the AG's office, because we have cases that we also want to be heard. And one thing that I think is a corollary to this is we also have to make sure that DA's offices have the resources to handle cases as well. There is only a finite sum of prosecutors that are out there. I think to the extent that we can expand that resources in both our urban and our rural communities, to be able to enlarge the number of folks that are able to prosecute violent crime cases, then that likewise is going to be something that can help us.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting because there's been a lot of talk about the need to help recruit and retain police officers, and I know that you agree with that. That's been one of the real strong themes of the session in terms of police immunity, things that we can do to make life easier for police officers. Can the same be said for prosecutors? I mean, that's not that's a job that you really do have to have a calling for. Do we need to do more to help support prosecutors and support that profession?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at sort of a survey across the state, Alabama's lagging behind some of our neighboring states. And to the extent that a young prosecutor who's been trained and knows how to make arguments in front of a jury sees that they can make just a little more money as contract defense counsel, right, to be able to provide for their family, then I think that for the state is a loss. And so I know the DAs have talked to the legislature about what they can do to be able to help that particular issue. And I think raising the pay and the opportunities for young people to be able to come in, I can tell you it's the best training ground for somebody that loves trying cases, wants to be a powerful advocate and make a change in community. If we can make it financially in their best interest to be able to come into these offices, I think we're going to greatly expand capacity as well as the delivery of services to the people of our state.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned Birmingham. So we've had a lot of talk about the metro area crime suppression unit here in Montgomery that you've been a part of. It's been a big success by everybody's accounts, from the city, the county, state. But there's talk about, there's legislation actually to expand that to allow other cities to have this, specifically Birmingham, and other cities might be involved. Let's say that passes. How does one go about expanding that? How does one take what happened in Montgomery, the successes of the crime suppression unit, expand it to another city, understanding that every area is different and their crime, root of their crime may be different?
Yeah, I think first of all, Montgomery has been a remarkable success, and I'll lay a lot of that credit at the feet of Hal Taylor and what they've done with Aaliyah, Derek Cunningham, who is a remarkable sheriff here in Montgomery County, as well as the willingness of the city of Montgomery and the police department to embrace the opportunity for help. We've been pleased to be able to offer investigators from our office. Prosecutors in my office have taken a load off of the DA's office here in Montgomery County with new cases that have come in. So it's been a collaborative effort where lots of people came together to address a problem. And the best thing is that the people that live in Montgomery feel safer. And I think that's the most tangible benefit that we can provide. Replicating it, though, is not necessarily easy. The resources the legislature is doing, I think, is a great effort. But Birmingham's different than Montgomery. Here we have one large municipality. We have a sheriff's office with the resources, with a county commission that was willing to step up, and I give our county commission chairman a great deal of credit here for recognizing that need. Birmingham, you've got multiple small jurisdictions. Mm-hmm. You have a little different dynamic as it relates to their ability to kind of come together and share resources, because if you sort of look at what happened in Montgomery, the sheriff devoted resources to the city. You had our office devote resources to the city. You had Aaliyah devote resources to the city. The question is whether or not in Birmingham, some of those other jurisdictions are willing to be able to help the issue directly involving the city of Birmingham.
Well,
I think
like
it's
a
important.
Split circuit, don't you? Like the
You do.
Bessemer cutoff and all that. So that's got to complicate things.
It does a little bit. It just really is where the case goes. But I think there has to be this embrace that there is a greater good. That took place here in Montgomery, and the question is whether or not that similar sentiment can go along with what's going on in Birmingham. Look, the more resources we can throw, the more bodies we can throw at a criminal justice problem, I think the better. The fact that people are engaged and motivated to address violent crime is always a good thing. But I think we have to be careful in saying just because it worked in Montgomery means it can be equally successful somewhere else, as there are different dynamic, different people involved in different issues that may come into play. But I commend everybody that's been involved in Montgomery, and we've all expressed a willingness to try to help replicate the similar success in other jurisdictions.
Has it been interesting this session? Because, I remarked earlier on, I guess it was after the State of the State, how, when's the last time public safety, public safety was the top priority for both the legislature and the governor coming into a session? I think it speaks to the fact that it is an issue for people out there, and which is remarkable that it's that big of a problem.
Oh, it's refreshing when you're in
you've
my
been out
role.
there talking about
yeah, for a long time, and candidly been pushing back against the buzzword of criminal justice reform, which I think has been problematic for us in the state. And to see people embrace this idea of, number one, we need to support law enforcement. Grateful that we've seen the governor's put together a package about Back the Blue. And I think there is, we talk a lot about the tangible and the intangible benefits. For the law enforcement officer that's working the street every day, to hear this state say that you're valued and you're important, I think is extremely important. To be able to send that message to local law enforcement that this state supports you. I mean, I think Alabama, unlike maybe some other states, has not drifted as far, but yet I think it's still important for us to make that as a policy statement, and to the extent that we can through civil liability reform, make sure that we can provide them additional support, whether there are other bills that impact the day-to-day life of those that are willing to protect and serve. I think it's an important statement for the state of Alabama, and I'm extremely pleased to see that discussion taking place.
Wanted to quickly ask you about redistricting. I think most people may not realize that the case, especially the congressional case, is ongoing, because we had all the stuff at the Supreme Court and the federal court and everything, but there is an actual trial going on. Can you update us on what's going on with that trial that I think is taking place in Birmingham?
It is, yeah. Remember, there's two cases pending, one involving several of our state Senate districts. That is already under submission to Judge Manasco in Birmingham, and we'll await her result. And just over the last month, there was a little over a couple weeks of trial involving the map that previously was used by the state of Alabama and then ultimately rejected by the court to investigate whether or not the legislature acted properly or not. The initial procedural posture of the case was just on the temporary relief because of the election that was coming up in 2024.
Right.
We've never had a chance to fully litigate the issues and the authority of the legislature and what they did and the propriety of what they did through their former maps. This trial was the full-blown hearing, and you had experts and witnesses on both sides. Our team, as well as those involved with the plaintiffs, will be submitting findings and fact and conclusions of law to the panel, and then it'll be up to them to decide what Alabama's map looks like going forward with the 2026 election until the time of the next census. I mean, we feel like we put on a strong case before the court to validate the intentions of the legislature. We'll see what happens with it. I will tell you that regardless of what the court decides and who they rule in favor of, I would expect both sides who are on the losing side of that will probably take it up to the 11th Circuit. There's a very interesting case at the Supreme Court involving the state of Louisiana that I think could potentially impact how the law overlays into the facts that will be presented here. And so I think this is still an evolving story and an evolving issue.
I think definitely a question or questions headed to the Supreme Court at some point. We will be watching that. I wanted to ask you about the recent commutation. Governor Ivey commutated the sentence, or commutated the death sentence of Robin Rocky Myers, who had been set to be executed, to life in prison without parole. You had an objection to this. You spoke out and said you were surprised that she had done this and said it was not the right thing to do. Talk about your objection to this commutation decision from the governor.
Yeah, I mean, fully within the governor's authority to do it, right? I mean, that's a power vested with any governor to review the possible commutation of somebody for which execution has been set. This case goes back to 1991. You know, one of the things, at least if what you can read, and the only thing I have received is what's in the governor's written materials, is they were concerned that there were no DNA and no fingerprint evidence. You know, the facts were that the defendant charged in this case was in possession on the night of the murder of the VCR of the woman that was killed. It was collateral for a crack cocaine purchase that he made, and he gave multiple conflicting statements how it came into his possession and when. DNA in 1991 was not the DNA that we have now. You know, recently I tried a case in Ozark that had genealogy DNA, a fascinating technology that allowed for us to be able to solve that case. This is pre-OJ, right? I mean, this is not a time in which we were able to collect DNA for it to be used substantively and forensically in a court of law. And so to use that as a criteria, I think, is missing the reality of 1991. And then second, the lack of fingerprint evidence. I mean, Todd, I can't tell you how many cases that I've tried over my career. Only one of those ever had fingerprint evidence. It's not the norm and it's not common. And it seemed as if the evaluation of this commutation petition was through a lens of 2025 and what it is that we would expect forensically. And that just isn't the reality of the day. We believe that the facts of the case itself demonstrated both through the physical and circumstantial evidence that there was a compelling nature of guilt. And that's why we objected to this commutation.
Could there be a circumstance where you could say, okay, that trial, maybe things didn't go right. Maybe we do need to review this. You got the ToForest Johnson case coming up. Can you see a circumstance in which it would be proper to say, well, let's review this. Was everything done okay? And maybe a commutation or not pursuing the death penalty would be proper.
Well, I think every case is unique, right? And I'm not going to comment on specifics as much as to be able to say we vest in the governor the authority to be able to make those decisions. And I respect the fact that Governor Ivey, or whoever's in the governor's position, has the ability to do it. I just strongly disagree with the conclusions they drew from the material they were presented.
Mm-hmm. We'll leave it there, but I do have to ask you, last time you were on, you confirmed to us that you were not going to pursue the governor's office in this next election. There's been some news on that front. It looks like Tommy Tuberville could get in the race. We've reported on that.
Right.
That really changes the dynamic. Most significantly, that there could be a U.S. Senate seat coming open. You have not ruled out running for other things beyond governor. Could we see your name on the ballot? Let's say Tuberville runs for governor. Could we see your name on the ballot for U.S. Senate?
Well, Tommy Tuberville hadn't announced that, so there is no open seat, and I have great support for what he's done in the U.S. Senate. If that seat comes open, the Senate's been sort of an overlay interest for what I've had as Attorney General, the work that we've done federally, many of the issues that we've been involved with. If that's an open seat, I think we'll be prepared to pivot quickly and make an announcement on whether or not we'd run.
Okay. It is getting into the season. Mr. Attorney General, thanks again for your time.
Always great.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Rick Pate, Alabama Commissioner of Agriculture and Industries. Commissioner, thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me, Todd.
Well, it's timely. It's rodeo weekend. We saw the parade out front by the Capitol, and I know y'all are off to and you were very involved in that. But what can people expect from the rodeo this weekend?
Well, the rodeo's really been improving. I don't know if it's the show Yellowstone or COVID or somehow, but yeah, there's a lot more interest in the rodeo and rodeos in general. And but this one has certainly improved. Each of the last 4 years, we've got some of the top stock from Frontier coming in, and so that's what the Cowboys want. They want really good bulls and horses to ride, because half the score's based on how rambunctious they are. So, but yeah, got good crowds. There's still plenty of tickets, as we do about half our business in walk-ups that just come that day. And if you go on the website, Southeastern Livestock Exposition Rodeo, there's specials like for military and families and different things, and you can take advantage of some of those things. But it's tonight starts off at 7, and tomorrow at 1. Saturday night at 7, and then we started having a Sunday matinee at 2. Gives you a little longer to go to church and have lunch and get out there.
Great quality family entertainment. And I was seeing footage earlier of the lady that rides 2 horses at once. It's amazing the talent there. And you're probably right about the whole Yellowstone thing. Everybody wants to be a cowboy now, right?
Well, you used to say you were from Texas. Now they ask if you were from Montana.
Okay, that's right. Lots to talk about issue-wise. I wanted to start with egg prices. Everybody's been really concerned about this because egg prices have been out of control, and I know there's a reason for that. We're starting to see maybe some improvement there, but remind us the whole point, the reason why egg prices are so high and what's being done about it.
Yeah, well, there's a disease in poultry called avian influenza, and it pretty much wipes them out. And so our strategy as the Department of Agriculture, once we get a little bit of it, we go in there and depopulate that whole house, and then we put a quarantine. Normally I think it's 3 kilometers around that area, and we won't, monitor everything that goes in or out for I think 40 days. But anyway, we're on top of it. We're aware of what it is. The protocols are in place, but not so much in Alabama. We hadn't really been hurt by it, but in the Midwest is more of the table laying eggs. We're mainly a broiler state here in Alabama, and so, but I heard the other day, since 1922, maybe depopulated 88 million chickens, and it just takes us a while to build that number back up. But
so it's a supply issue. There's fewer eggs.
Yeah, there's fewer eggs, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but we're gonna get there.
Okay. I know that people will appreciate having some progress there, and I hope they'll keep going down. On a related note, tariffs. Tariffs. We don't know everything that's going to go on. We don't know what the president's going to, implement, scale back, all that. But I know that tariffs impact agriculture, and I wanted to ask you what you're hearing from producers in the state about concerns. Maybe it's fertilizer, other materials that they've got to get. What are you hearing from producers in Alabama?
Well, the thing almost changes daily. He puts a tariff, or says he's going to put a tariff, and puts it off right before, and then somebody else threatens us back with a tariff. And so we think, I'm actually president of the Southern United States Trade Association, so I travel 2 or 3 times a year trying to do trade. Just got back from 10 days in Vietnam, talking and meeting with them. But there's a big demand, but we've made some bad deals over the years, and so there has to be, and there probably will be a little pain here while we reset some of these deals. But yeah, we've let other countries really take advantage of us, and to tariff our products when it goes in their country, and then we don't reciprocate when they come back. And so yeah, there's going to be a lot of blustering and talk. We'll see. I think in long term it's going to be good for agriculture. Okay. Short term, there'll be some pain. The thing that I believe that most people feel like, most farmers feel like, the president, he won with really middle America, rural America support. And before, when he was president, he kind of took care when we had a few issues, kind of helped out. So I don't think he's going to leave us hanging. But we already got problems. Our row crop farmers, commodity prices are less than break even, and so there's some other structural, but I do feel like there's a feeling in this country that we know that food security is national security, that we can't count on China and Mexico or anybody to feed us. And so we have to have that ability to feed ourselves. And so I think there's enough political will or enough intelligence around this subject that we won't lose our agricultural base.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that subject of commodity prices and all that, it's past time for a new farm bill in Congress. It's supposed to be every 5 years. I think we're on year 7 at this point of a new farm bill. They're kind of passing Band-Aids. What's your, I know you remain in touch with the congressional delegation. What are we hearing about the prospects for a new farm bill updating some of those commodity policies?
It's interesting. Farm bills like immigration. You never find anybody that didn't think immigration needed to be fixed, even Democrats. And so I was in Washington 2 weeks ago at our meeting of 50 ag commissioners, and we had Amy Klobuchar, who's obviously a Democrat from Minnesota, I think, and there was another Democrat there. Nobody's against passing a new farm bill. It's where they get down in the weeds and start saying, what is it? And of course, some of your viewers might not be aware, but 83% of the farm bill is SNAP programs and nutritional programs, and so there's a natural, I guess, fighting for who gets a bigger percentage of that pot. I mean, 1% difference would make a huge difference for farmers, and so the biggest thing right now, because they hadn't changed it in so long, and input costs have gone up so much, the reference, which is sort of the welfare price, what you get when you're just about to lose your farm, is so low now. Even if you get it, you're going to probably go out of business. And so that's one of the main things. We just need the new farm bill to reflect really the break-even point or in most of our commodities, and it does not now.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll get an update from the congressional delegation next time they're on. But so important, that farm bill, not just for farmers in Alabama, but throughout the country. And you mentioned that. I mean, there are folks struggling out there. Y'all have this campaign, you've got your button on here, about Thank a Farmer. Talk about this campaign and why it's important.
Well, during COVID, the first time I think as Americans we saw a few things weren't on the shelves, and I thought I saw people start to appreciate the fact that there was a farmer that grew it or raised whatever's on that shelf. That grocery store didn't provide that, a warehouse didn't provide it, a farmer provided that food. And then, of course, we refilled the shelves, and that feeling went away. And of course, I think it's appropriate, but we do such a great job in this country of honoring our first responders, our active military, our policemen, and the farmer kind of gets left off, but we need him just about as bad as and you need him every day. And so really just bring awareness that, that whatever you're eating, somebody's behind it, a family's behind it, is trying to pay a mortgage or trying to pay their fuel bills or equipment costs, and just to raise that awareness. All vocations are honorable. I'm not saying what you and I do are honorable, but they don't need me and you as much as they need that farmer day in and day out.
Yeah, and maybe you're right. Those empty shelves were a reminder of all that. Switching gears real quick, your office sent out a press release this week talking about these seeds, these packages of seeds that were arriving unexpectedly in Alabama. I guess that's from China or somewhere like that. Just y'all wanted to get the word out about if you get an unsolicited packet of seeds, call us and let us know what's going on here.
Well, we never really figured out what was going on before during COVID when that happened. We thought somebody was trying to trigger some algorithm so that their name would pop up. But we've received 3 that we're aware of in Alabama. We have a very DEA certified food and drug lab on our campus here in Montgomery, and so we've 2 of them. One proved to be tomato seeds, another turned to be onion seeds, and I don't think we've gotten on the 3rd one yet. But yeah, if you get something like that, don't go. Last time people went out and planted them, we had to dig the dirt up, and
we don't know where they're coming from, if they have contagions or something like that.
Yeah, we don't know what kind of noxious weed they could be, and so, yeah, just either call your extension office, call our office. We'll come get them if you can't drop them off, and we'll germinate them and see what they actually are.
Interesting. Okay. Before I let you go, it's 2026 is right around the corner. We've talked about this before. You've been, you've not ruled out, I guess, a run for governor. We've talked about it before. Where are you now? Because now you got Coach Tuberville thinking about running. You got Ainsworth, just chomping at the bit. What's your latest thinking in terms, because you're termed out, right? You can't run for ag commissioner again. What are you thinking? Might we see a Pate for governor in 2026?
Well, Tuberville's certainly a game changer because of his name recognition and the job he's done in Washington. So him and I, we've talked 4 or 5 times. At first he was going to be Trump appointed Secretary of Commerce, and then Secretary of Interior, and then he was going to be the best senator. And then in January he told me he was thinking 50-50. He had me call him through somebody else, and I said, well, that's fine. And then we were actually on the same flight to Washington 2 weeks ago, and the flight got delayed an hour, so him and I kind of went off for 30 minutes, and I think he told me as a friend, but he said, yeah, I'm probably going to run. And so, yeah, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't challenge him. Yeah.
No, and I'm not saying I'm really trying to challenge anybody, but yeah, I feel like I still got something left in the tank and something left to give, and I feel like done a pretty doggone good job at the Department of Ag. And so if that door closes, I mean, we'll see what door opens. I mean, God always has opened a door for me, and so if that was to run for lieutenant governor or something else, I'm not going to run for anything else, I can't imagine, but there might be something somewhere else that I can bring value. So we'll just see. We really got to May. I think that was what Tuberville sort of said, and once he makes a decision, I guess I'll make a decision.
Yeah, I think everybody's waiting on him because that affects not just governor but all down the ballot. So it's going to be interesting to see. Well, we're out of time, Commissioner, but good luck with the rodeo, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Todd. I always enjoy it.
We'll be right back.
Since 1997, Alabama Public Television has provided programs, services, and resources to child care professionals, teachers, and parents. Visit aptv.org/education to learn more.
Tuskegee University is the second oldest historically black college in Alabama and one of the largest in the United States. Founded in 1881 as the normal school for colored teachers at Tuskegee, the school quickly became a driving force in the developing industrial education movement under the leadership of noted educator Booker T. Washington, its first president. In its early decades, Tuskegee Institute made significant contributions to agriculture and improving the lives of rural black farmers. Tuskegee has played an integral role in Alabama history and education. It pioneered the movable school, served as the training ground for the Tuskegee Airmen, and students and faculty were heavily involved in the civil rights movement. In addition to its many notable alumni and academic developments, it was the first HBCU to have a marching band. Tuskegee University was recently ranked as the top black college in Alabama and the 6th nationally.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. And please stay safe out there this weekend as dangerous storms are passing through. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.